You're listening to Precinct 444, a podcast network from the National Law Enforcement Museum. Today we're bringing you an episode from the Encore series, where we revisit past museum programs and conversations. Hello, and welcome back to this episode of Encore, featuring a revisit of Voices for Change, Excellence in Black Law Enforcement Media, a program in partnership with the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, or NOBLE. This program brought together influential law enforcement officers from around the country who utilize various media platforms such as social networks, public speaking, and documentary films to inspire a new generation of officers and community leaders and create more awareness for the profession of law enforcement and the officers protecting our communities. The program begins with remarks from former CEO Marcia Ferranto and opening remarks from the 45th president of NOBLE, Brenda Goss Andrews. And now for Voices for Change, Excellence in Black Law Enforcement Media.
Hello, good evening, everyone. I'm Marcia Ferranto. The National Law Enforcement Museum aims to tell the stories of American law enforcement. Today's topic is a prime example of one of those stories, and one that continues to evolve on a daily basis. In the last decade, social media has driven public perception of law enforcement, often in a negative light. But there are several individuals in the law enforcement field who are using the same media platforms to help reverse the narrative. They share glimpses of their own experiences as law enforcement officers and encourage others to not only support the men and women in this honorable profession, but also to become law enforcement officers themselves. Today, we're going to hear from several of those influential law enforcement officers from around the country who are utilizing various media platforms like social media, documentary film, and public speaking to inspire a new generation of officers and community leaders and create more awareness for the profession of law enforcement and the officers protecting our communities. Facilitating this important discussion is Lieutenant Colonel Kristal Turner-Childs, retired Deputy Commissioner of Staff for the Pennsylvania State Police. She will be engaging our panelists in an enlightening discussion that will consider important questions of long-term benefits of social media to the field of law enforcement and whether it is beneficial for agencies to have strategic plans in place when it comes to alternative media exposure. Before we dive into tonight's conversation, I want to thank our generous sponsor, Target, who has been a longtime supporter of the National Law Enforcement Museum. And Target feels that these conversations are important to help expand the awareness of significant topics within the law enforcement community. Additionally, we are grateful to once again partner with the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, NOBLE, to deliver a program during Black History Month that highlights the achievements and major contributions of Black law enforcement officers around the country. It is my privilege to welcome Brenda Goss Andrews, President of NOBLE, who is with us today to provide opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Marcia, and thank you for having us. Thank you for having NOBLE. It is a pleasure. And you're so right. There have been a lot of negativity around social media. So I am happy to be here today to celebrate the positive side of social media and what it means to law enforcement. So just a couple of things. Law enforcement agencies do understand the influence that social media has on all of our lives. Social media engages the public and it allows law enforcement to create a level of transparency, a level of a two-way communication that we weren't able to do in law enforcement several decades ago. So we understand the importance of transparency and building community trust. And social media gives us that opportunity to connect on a positive note with the community, and especially with our youth. Many agencies now have developed policies and procedures surrounding the use of social media, both on and off duty. The World Wide Web has come a long way over the past 2 decades. The internet, we have to face, has become a way of life. I commend these officers who found their voice and a way of expressing themselves and use their skills to connect and reach people from many different kinds of platforms and to gain trust in the community. During some of the most challenging times now that we have, it's important that as law enforcement officers, that we are able to connect with people, that people can see us as individuals and not just law enforcement enforcers. Social media gives us that opportunity to connect with the community and connect with our youth. I am so happy that we're able to tell this story, because a lot of times this story does not get told because we always see the negative side of social media. So you are in for a treat today to see all the great things that these officers have done to connect with the community, and especially communities of color who traditionally have had problems with law enforcement. So you'll see some stories, and I'm looking forward to seeing it as well. So I am proud as the president of Noble to once again partner with the National Law Enforcement Memorial and Museum to bring together the incredible stories of these officers from around the country as they connect and communicate with the community and with fellow law enforcement officers. Thank you on behalf of Noble for having me here today.
Well, you know, I always feel it's a good day when we have President Goss Andrews with us, even if it's virtually in the museum. It's great to have you. And I want to offer a special thank you for joining us tonight, as well as Noble for your support. It's wonderful. I would like to now introduce you to our moderator for tonight's discussion, Lieutenant Colonel Kristal Turner-Childs. Lieutenant Colonel Turner-Childs boasts a 25-year career as a Pennsylvania state trooper, and though now retired, she was the first African-American female deputy commissioner of staff of the Pennsylvania State Police. We are honored to have her facilitate tonight's discussion, and now I will turn it over to you, Lieutenant Colonel.
Thank you so much, and welcome everyone. It is such an honor to be here this evening. I want to get all of our panelists up and shown on the screen. And welcome to Voices for Change, Excellence in Black Law Enforcement Media. We are looking for some strong and healthy dialogue this evening, and just talking about the positive uses that law enforcement can undertake when it comes to social media. So let me start off. Let me just start off with giving just a little bit of a statistic, and then we're going to just jump right in. According to the Congressional Research Service, law enforcement and technology, over 70% of US adults are estimated to have used social media in the year 2021. Law enforcement has also turned to social media to help in its operations. Law enforcement relies on social media as a tool for information sharing as well as information gathering to assist in investigations. To the community, law enforcement can be fascinating and contentious. So let's get our panel in here so we can get started, because we don't have a whole lot of time and we got a lot to talk about. So let's get our panel in here. And the first thing I want to talk about this evening is how social media can help law enforcement increase public trust. We have Officer Anthony Johnson from the Columbus, Ohio Police Department. We also have Sergeant Eric McCants from Burke County, Georgia Sheriff's Office. We have Assistant Chief Jonni Redick, retired, from California Highway Patrol. We have Mr. Jim Clock, who's a former deputy sheriff from Stafford County, Virginia Sheriff's Office. Let's go, panel. So that first question that I have, How can social media help law enforcement increase public trust? Officer Johnson, can you help me out?
Absolutely, I can. It's an honor to be here. When I think about how social media could help law enforcement in a positive way, we have to first ask ourselves what we already have in place, what officers are already doing positive things, and then use social media to highlight that. I think that's the key behind having a social or a positive, impactful social media presence that the community is going to want to engage with. Because if you start a social media platform, but you already don't have people in place who are doing positive things, then you're working backwards. You know, we have to start at what really matters, focus on the officers who are out here doing positive things, and then highlight that work using social media. As you said, 70% of people have access and are using social media, and that's a very huge opportunity to reach people and show people the amazing work that officers are doing day in and day out nationwide.
Thank you. Sergeant McCants, do you have anything to add to that? I mean, public trust is huge right now. Every day I can pick up my phone and find some type of incident where law enforcement is being questioned about their practices. So tell me, help us out. How can we build public trust utilizing social media?
Well, it's going to create transparency with law enforcement. Like I say, just showing the ups and downs of law enforcement. And like I said, you want to show the positive, you want to highlight that, because in many instances, we don't get shown that by the public. But you also got to show the bad that comes with it. But showing that your officers out there in the community try to build that relationship with the community that they serve is something that most people don't see. They just think we're out there writing tickets and stuff like that. But if you show them out there giving candy to the kids, helping individuals who have flat tires, stuff like that, it builds a rapport with individuals that think that law enforcement is just out there just to arrest people. And while that is our job, we still have other functions to build that rapport with the community. Because like, without the community, law enforcement can't do their job correctly. So we use social media correctly, we can build that rapport that we need and create almost a unity that we need instead of this division that we have with the community.
Okay, so you talked about using it correctly. So what does that, tell me what that looks like. Tell me what that looks like.
Well, just make sure you're showing the right things on social media. Make sure you're portraying the perfect picture, or well, not be the perfect picture, a good picture on law enforcement. Make sure you're not on social media showing cuss words, even though you might have it in videos that you might show, but just officers out there doing the wrong things. So make sure that you focus on the good part of law enforcement. Like I say, many times with my sheriff's department, like I say, we have a community service division, and you want to make sure you highlight those events. A lot of people don't see those things that's going on, and they feel like, well, you're not doing anything for the community. But if you highlight that on social media and you put it out ahead enough time, people will know that, hey, well, law enforcement trying to have like Shop with a Cop Day during Christmas, hot dogs and hamburgers during April month and all that stuff like that. So if you highlight those things, it can build that positive light that you need on law enforcement. So always showing the bad things that happen in the national media that they show. Okay. So you talked about highlighting the positive. So Assistant Chief Jonni Redick, I want to come to you now. He's talking about highlighting the positive. He's talking about using social media to engage the community. I need a little bit more, because if we're going to use this social media, that doesn't mean that every officer gets to pull it out of their back pocket and just start, just taking video and things. Tell me how that looks.
Well, first of all, I just want to say I love the change and reframing of the positive moments versus we do get stuck on terms like building trust. And what does building trust even mean? What does that even look like? And sometimes when we're talking about building trust, that may mean that we have to be more vulnerable than we want to be in the transparency that we continue to talk about. But how vulnerable do we want to be? How transparent do we really want to be? And I'm speaking from a leadership lens. When you're overseeing an agency where you have all these different compliance agencies that restrict and limit what you can and can't do, because your brand can be impacted by how we use social media. And so we have to be very cognizant of that we love to go out and be able to highlight everything. And I think we need to change old paradigms and leadership mindsets that we have to release some of the control. And we can do that by providing training to help amplify the message in the departments. One PIO or public information officer can't do the full job of, say, you have several that are ambassadors or advocates for the department, and they know the policy, they know the guidelines, they know what they should and shouldn't be posting and how they should. And it should go well beyond just, to me, community events where we're out, spending time, but it could also be in meetings where we're talking about serious conversations that aren't going to violate any kind of confidentiality. So we can let people in to know what the department is working on, because when we're building websites to create communication and access to information, we also need to do that through our social media platforms. I think a lot of people in our profession might see those platforms as more for the youth and something that engaged them. You just said it. You gave a statistic on how many people use social media. I think that's almost like 1 in 4 people when you think about that. So this is a great way and a great opportunity to be able to lean in and figure out how you need to develop your strategies around that. And I know we're going to talk more about that.
We are. And I'm glad you brought up vulnerability. And I'm glad you talked about being in the meetings, right? Because when people are very curious about law enforcement and what it is that we do. I still speak in the present tense because it wasn't that long ago that I retired. But I did see a wonderful question in the chat that I want to address. Thank you, Anthony Adams. And I kind of want to pose this to you, Assistant Chief. What is the role of Black officers in creating transparency with police departments?
So that's a great question. And it's a big question, but it can also be a specific question. So one of the things that not only when I was working, but what I do now as an adjunct professor at 2 different universities, and I speak about it, is how we show up. How we show up and what we do when we show up really matters. And so we know that we are under a microscope all the time. And we're going to break this down just a little bit. We can be under the microscope based on a lot of different variables and factors, but let's make it law enforcement. Let's make it Black officers who are in law enforcement. We can even break it down to be Black women in law enforcement. The optics and that expectation for us shifts, the smaller we get in those rings or those degrees. And so when we were out there doing our work and we're talking about how do we influence social media, how do we influence positivity, what do we do? It's in our actions, it's in our behaviors, it's in the things on how we go the extra. To me, how do we want to get involved? How do we want to engage? So I think about Officer Johnson. I happened to look at some of your social media. I don't think I've really heard of you before, but when I did, I was like, holy cow, these are the kind of things that we can do besides just showing up for the call.
Yeah.
Just being present at the call. When we're there, we have opportunities to do so many other things. And so that's just kind of my 2 cents, and I'll let other people weigh in.
Yes. And I'm going to, that question really resonates with me because he said the role of Black officers. And, we'll have to do a whole nother panel discussion about the role of Black officers and the number of Black officers exactly in law enforcement. But I don't want to miss my friend. I want to get my friend Jim Clock in here, former deputy sheriff from Stafford County Sheriff's Office. And Jim, I want you to tell the people some of the things that you were doing, please.
I'm actually still a current part-time deputy sheriff in Stafford. So I work with Sheriff Decatur very closely on a lot of these matters. And so, yeah, thank you for having me.
So let me ask you something, Jim, since you're still current, should there be some strategic plan or vision when police use social media?
Well, I think there should always be a good plan, but I think we need to be more open-minded to it. I think we play by a set of rules that really no one has set, and when I made the documentary, the big thing about making the documentary was I came under a lot of opposition simply because how can a white officer make a documentary about Black police officers? Well, simple.
Some people don't know about your documentary, so please tell us.
Sorry. The documentary is called The Thin Black Line. Comes out in June of this year, and it follows several African-American police officers over the last couple of years. And basically it's their story of how they face racism and then put on the uniform and go out and try to make a difference. And, a lot of the opposition are you making propaganda? And I wasn't. And I actually was very honest about it. And I said, this is not a pro-police movie. This is a pro-person of color movie. That's what it is. And I think that when we get into this stuff of social media, and I do believe we need to be putting more positivity out. But I really liked what Chief Jonni said too, is the vulnerability is the key. Right now, there's so much divide. We're not real. Cops aren't real. You're either the TV version, or you're the propaganda version, or they think there's a false narrative to it. But one thing I've often said is I was 21 years old when I gave my first death notification. And I knew walking back to my car that my life would never be the same. I knew it in my heart. I just knew. I was like, I'll never be the same. That changed me. I think we need to not just, I love what Anthony does. He does an incredible job. I got to know Anthony producing another movie for the museum. But I also think we've got to open our eyes to showing the compassionate side of law enforcement. And not everybody is going to be as outgoing as Anthony, right? Some people are introverts, but they're amazing police officers, and they're getting to know kids and after school programs, or they're working in detective divisions where, I had lunch not long ago where a detective was meeting a family 8 years before. 8 years he had worked the homicide of one of their loved ones, and he still every year went and had lunch with them every year. And those are the type of things I think that I talk with the sheriff about. I was like, let's stop playing by these rules. And then also with the misinformation, the opposite side, or the anti-narrative with social media, is they can put anything out, lies, numbers, all this, but we're afraid to put numbers out. We're afraid to go and post. Well, let's show you what the actual numbers are for Stafford County, for Philadelphia. Let's show you. We don't do that. We don't want to get in the numbers game. Why not? Why wouldn't we? It's part of transparency. So I think we have our lens are too small. I think we need a wide open lens of how to show more of the internal, the struggles, the beauty, and the connection and the love of why we do the job.
In the run up to this panel discussion, and I spoke to a few of you, and I know for sure, Jim, we had this conversation, and I was talking about police officers, and it's interesting that we all brought up vulnerability tonight, but people always see us in this hard exterior and don't see us as human beings sometimes. And we, as law enforcement, sometimes put the onus on the public to see us as human beings. And I believe that the onus should be on us to show the vulnerability, to show the world exactly who we are. And we should be policing from the heart, right? So AJ, people been talking about you, bro. So yeah, I need you to tell people what you're doing out there with your social media. What's going on?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important to first start off by saying I didn't reinvent the wheel. And people ask me all the time, how can I, as a police officer, go out into the community and get engagement and put it on social media and have as many people see it as possible? And I always ask them, like, well, what do you enjoy doing? Because people don't want to see you be who you think they want you to be. They want to see you be who you truly are. And that is the key to it. So when I first got on the department, or a department at the current agency that I work for, I realized that there was a lack of positive police interactions on social media. But as we've all talked about, there was unlimited amounts of negativity surrounding our profession. And me being a current police officer, I knew that that wasn't a true representation of our profession. So what I started doing was going out into the community and recording things that I did prior to this huge social media success. And they're very simple things. Kids like playing rock, paper, scissors. So I started a rock, paper, scissors series. And to this day, it was the most successful series. Tens of millions of people viewed this series. And it got to the point where radio stations were calling me and they wanted me to be on the news playing rock, paper, scissors with the news anchors. And it's something as simple as that everyone enjoys doing, but they've never seen a police officer do it because more times than not, we're guarded or we have policies that prevent us from doing this. And they see it and they're like, wow, this is the coolest thing ever. I've never seen anything like that. And what it ultimately breaks down to is I'm showing my human side. I'm showing the same person that I am off duty, whether it's me racing a group of kids after school on foot, whether it's us doing push-up competitions, whether it's us freestyle, like rap battling each other, like playing tic-tac-toe on a cruiser windshield. Like, once again, we're not reinventing the wheel here. It's just showing who I am as a person. I just happen to be a police officer 8 hours, 10 hours a day. And to me, that is the reason why I've had the success that I have had. And I'm vulnerable. People know who I am. They know the struggles that I've faced. They know the opposition I've faced doing this internally and externally, because I've communicated it through social media. And what that does is it develops a trust. They go, we trust Officer Johnson because we know that he's going to tell us what's real. He's not going to sugarcoat it by any means and tell us what he thinks we need to hear. So hopefully that answers your question. As you can see, I'm very passionate about this, and I don't want to take up too much time. But that's the success that I've had.
So you mentioned trust. You said the people that you're engaging in say, we trust Officer Johnson, right?
Correct.
Tell me the benefit to that.
Unlimited. There's an unlimited benefit. To me, I'll tell you the coolest benefit that I've seen is I've had so many people tell me, I don't like the police, but I like you, Officer Johnson. You're the cool cop. So then what happens is I introduce them to my partner that I work with every day. And then I'm no longer the cool cop. We're the cool cops. And then we introduce them to another buddy that we work with. And before we know it, we've exchanged phone numbers. We're texting back and forth, and they probably have more police officer friends than I do because I was able to establish that trust. So to me, that's the coolest benefit behind it, because they start to get input on different topics from police officers that they trust, multiple police officers. And then it changes the way that they think about some of the videos that they see, or some of the stories that they hear, or some of the interactions that they themselves have had with the police. They know, oh, well, he shined the light in my face at night because he wanted to see where my hands were, because we know that traffic stops are dangerous. I learned that from one of my police officer buddies that Officer Johnson introduced me to. So it's this unlimited domino effect that occurs when you establish that trust of one person who may not have liked the police before, but considers you the one that they could trust.
Got it. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Chief Redick, there's a question in the chat, and I think it's tailor-made for you. Many of the panelists have mentioned the term highlight the positive. Do you think that us as a profession and a culture fall into the habit of feeding into the negative while missing the opportunity to do what we speak of, the positive? Whew. That question right there.
I mean, I don't even know if I have to answer that. I mean, I think we all know what the answer is, that yes, absolutely. It's comfortable sometimes for us to fall into the conversation that has already been created versus going against the grain and creating a narrative that looks different in the sense of how we see it. We see that inside the organization with our professionals, with our staff, with our personnel, that we can easily go along. And so as a researcher, because like I said, I'm a professor at a couple of schools, as a researcher, we want to look into what is the real data? What is it really saying to us? And maybe have an interpretation for ourselves as individuals, but that takes courage. It takes courage for us to have that voice that is not going to sound like the rest of the group. Are we going to be treated differently? Are we going to be rejected in our friendships and our peers? And then externally, when we do that, it becomes, are we supporting our department? Are we supporting the community and what they believe? They don't know what we do and how we feel. And then you create this whole different, divided kind of experience. And so I remember one of our sergeants is a Black male sergeant. We had protests in our local area, and he happened to be standing with the protesters having a conversation. He was from the local community. He supported and not just for them to have their First Amendment rights, but he supported their reason for wanting to be out there to speak out on the issue that had happened, which happened to happen in the Black community. However, the department didn't necessarily see it that way. So there became additional questions on, what were you doing? Officer safety. We started using language like that versus, I think our personnel, when we properly train them, and President Goss Andrews talks about the standardization of training for national standards. When we provide that training for people, we know that they're going to take their tactics and their safety very seriously, but we don't want to take their humanity from them. And unfortunately, a lot of what we do restricts their ability to be human in the moment, to have the experience. And I think that transcends so much when we can allow them to do that, and we can trust them to do that and trust that they're still going to be able to do their job.
Well, I have you. I know you're retired, but I want you to go back to being assistant chief for a little bit. So when we're talking about this social media and we're talking about this policy, should we be planning for it? Should we put this in our strategic plans? Should it be part of the vision, mission statements that we utilize? From a leadership standpoint, right? Because as a leader, you got a lot to oversee. What should we be doing from a leadership standpoint, from the top down, right? Because they're going to be looking to us. They're going to be looking to you as the chief. What should we do? What should we be doing so that we can implement a social media type of program like Officer Johnson is doing?
Well, absolutely. I mean, strategic plans are the blueprint for any agency. It gives us our priorities. It gives us our direction. What are we going to be trying to achieve, whether it's 3-5 years or whatever the outlook is. And so if we put it in our priorities, it becomes a part of our focus. If we don't put it in our priorities, it does not. It stays on the periphery. It becomes these cool things that we do in the moment, but we can't sustain them. They're not something that maybe we even provide budget towards, so we can provide personnel, we can provide training. We have to develop the policy that fits. We have to think about all those implications when we do that, but it's all possible. But you'd be surprised how many agencies don't have social media. They don't use it effectively for many things other than to put out a missing person or something like that, or maybe an event, but they don't use it in its full capacity because it should be for investigative purposes. It should be for intelligence gathering. It should be for highlighting the department's positive things. It should be for communication. It should be for both bright spot activities as well as policing activities. It is a tool that is not being leveraged. But if you take time and you put it in your strategic plan, you think about what your mission is, how you're going to develop your strategy for approaching and your branding, and what your resources you're going to allocate to it, you'd be surprised in what your outcomes will look like. The same way that we do for if we're going to go suppress crime, or we're going to do something for facilities, we're going to build something in 3 to 5 years and we put it in there in a capital outlay and we put the money towards it. Doggone it if that building isn't built, right? It's the same kind of focus and intentionality.
Agreed. It's interesting, Sergeant McCann, that we can put together plans to go and serve warrants. We can put together strategic plans to go and break up burglary rings, but we don't necessarily put together plans for social media. I know I've seen you do some podcasts and things like that. So help me out. Tell me some things that your podcast is able to do to impact the community in a positive way.
Well, one way is, like I said, it's built that rapport, like I talk about. Also, it gives people an opportunity to understand the daily life of a law enforcement officer. With podcasts, most of the time people can ask questions just so they can get more understanding of what's going on in the community, and also about these events that happen nationally, like why certain things happen the way it did, or is that how every law enforcement is. So when you do different things like podcasts, or you're doing interviews, stuff like that, it gives the community an opportunity to hear from somebody that's basically on the front lines and know what they're thinking about. So that's why I think it's always important to stay engaged with everyone on social media. Because like I say, a lot of times people don't read the newspaper anymore, all that stuff. They look at social media, they're on their phone most of the time. And like I say, if you can reach somebody real quickly through a social media post or something like that, you can let them know what's going on in the community, what to look out for. Also, it gives the community an opportunity to tell law enforcement what's going on. Like I say, I tell people all the time, most of the time, law enforcement don't solve crimes by themselves. The community gives us stuff, especially being an investigation. I know that stuff, like working narcotics. Most of our job is done by people on the outside. They'll be like, okay, I'm tired of this house. I need you to come look at this house. Keep it anonymous, whatever, however they want to do it, but you got to stay engaged with it. And with social media and law enforcement, we kind of think of it as an afterthought. Like after something happens, we might put something out. But if you have some people that's actually dedicated to being social media spokesperson for that law enforcement agency, it can have a snowball effect of creating just that transparency that you need, and also creating that trust that you need between the community and law enforcement.
Thank you. Jim, I want to go back. I want to talk a little bit more about, you and what you're doing with the film and things like that. And I want to talk about if you're building up a social media platform in your agency, what does it look like? Just do you have any ideas? Can you help us just kind of understand for the people that aren't, that only see law enforcement from what they read or it's something like that? Just if we're talking about a social media platform that is going to impact the community in a positive way, with your background and what you do, tell me, how does that look?
Yeah, and I'll start with that. So, my full-time job now is I'm an actor and filmmaker. So I work mostly in Los Angeles, and that's, that the entertainment industry have the best publicists in the world. And I have been screaming this from the top of my lungs to my sheriff for years, and other law enforcement executives who really, for some reason, you don't go to SWAT school and have someone that's not the tactical expert teach SWAT school. You don't go to motor school and have someone who doesn't know how to ride motorcycles teaching you. Yet, we don't employ the experts in law enforcement to run these social media. So you got Anthony, you got the Sarge, you got guys like me who are trying to somehow utilize. Now, I'm very blessed to have the tools that I do, but I can tell you, if it would not have been for the pandemic, I'm never making the thin black line. I wouldn't have had the time. I wouldn't have had the ability at that point to be, outside and not working. And it was a perfect storm for me to be able to do it. And I did have a sheriff, as the chief said, retired chief said, I had a sheriff who had the courage. He had the courage to say, I'm okay with whatever my officers say. And that takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of courage to do social media in a way where you bring in an outside person who's an expert in social media, branding, and publicity, and say, let's build our brand. Let's be on the offensive, and let's learn how to put and build our agency in the social media platform in a way that we use our officers and our resources and our community to come together. Instead, what do we end up doing? Usually it's someone that gets assigned to PIO, and they go to a class like you did, like you told me you do. You go to some class, like now all of a sudden you're the resident expert on being a PIO. So I think when it came down to me making the film and by the grace of God, Sheriff Decatur being okay with it, and then having several officers having the courage to speak their truth, was the first time of just really being able to say, and you don't ever hear me on the film. Like, that's the beautiful thing about the film. The film itself is through the lens of people in the community leaders, the sheriff, and the officers, is being able to step back and say, here's how a professional film is done. It's produced this way, it's edited this way, here's the delivery, and here's the sale of that film to a distribution company that's going to market the film. Think about that. At no point did I mention, I had to go back to the sheriff and go through the regs. Had to go back to when I'm in the editing, doing the final cut, I had to make sure, because what he had to sign off on was he had to have the courage to say, I trust you. Let's make it truthful. So that's my 2 cents on it.
I trust you. Let's make it truthful. I like that. So, AJ, I'm going to be devil's advocate. So,
absolutely,
you're out here and you're doing this social media thing, and you're getting all kind of views and likes and retweets and all those things. I'm not completely social media. Don't laugh at me. Don't laugh at me. Don't tease me. But for the naysayers that say, y'all are just doing this just to get likes and retweets, and it ain't really helping in the community, what do you say to that?
You're always going to have somebody. You're always going to have a naysayer. That's why it's important that you are already doing these things before your social media policy or before your social media platforms are started. I've had so many people come up to me and they say things along the lines of, we want to start an Instagram. What should we do? And my immediate question is well, what are you already doing? Like what's your goal in starting your Facebook page? What's your goal in starting your Instagram? We really want to bridge the gap between the community that we serve. What are you already doing to bridge that gap? Well, we've got a couple community liaisons. They do X, Y, and Z. Okay, highlight the work that they do. We're not working backwards here. We're not going to start a social media platform and then try to figure out what we're going to do to put on there. There are police officers nationwide, an overwhelming majority of police officers nationwide that do positive work day in and day out. It is our job to tell that story. It's our job to highlight that. At the end of the day, we trust our police officers with a badge and a gun, when to use that gun, when not to use it, and to take away people's freedom. We need to trust them to go out here and make a positive impact and highlight it on social media. We overthink this so much. Like, I wish I had $1 for every time a supervisor or a person of power has reached out to me and overcomplicated this thing. We all have rules of conduct, how we should act on duty, how we should act off duty. All we have to do is add a third sentence in there, and on social media. That's it. So let me rewind and get back on track here. I'm sorry. So for the naysayers out there, there's two groups. There's a group who, no matter what we say, they don't want to believe it's true. So it's kind of irrelevant for me to address that small group of people, but for the larger group of people who it's foreign to them, they haven't seen it, give us a chance. That's what give us a chance. Give us a chance to show you that it's true, that it's genuine, that it's not propaganda, that we're not just going out here to highlight the good that we do. And that goes back to us being transparent and vulnerable.
Propaganda. So listen, we do this social media. You're doing this social media. You've had clearly a positive outcome. Chief Redick, how does this social media, because now we're going to do strategic planning, we're talking about all these things, does it affect the credibility of the agency? Do they start to begin to not be taken seriously with this social media? I'm just kind of throwing it out there. I'm just, because that's part of my job.
It is part of your job as moderator. So I would ask, taken seriously in what way, based on what we're posting? For example, I think about all the challenges that used to be out, the dance challenges that agencies were doing. And so I'm a professor at a junior college, and I teach on the front end in administration of justice for students who are coming in interested in policing, and it's going through our California Post Academy. And we do a community engagement course, and they're very immersed in the culture within the communities that they're going to serve, and they do a project. But part of that is also exposing them to different things that maybe they haven't seen, that the law enforcement is engaged in. And I've shown them the one from Seattle, Washington, where they did the challenge. And you have Chief Carmen Best, who's a part of this video with her, every stakeholder you can think of. And when I showed it to them, I asked them, what was it that you observed when you watched it? Now, these are young people. They're in their 20s. They're interested in law enforcement. Some of them are sponsored going through. Some of them are not, meaning some have agencies paying. Others are hoping to get an agency by the time they go through. And the first things that they talk about are, wow, I didn't know that we could have that much fun. I didn't know that you could laugh and do those kind of things. I had a young woman say, I didn't think maybe policing was going to be for me because I'm not really like that. I'm kind of goofy. I'm kind of silly. But wow, it's nice to see that you can kind of be yourself. And so I would say to you, maybe as a thought for us to think about, imagine we're just real people. We're people like all of them. We laugh, we cry, we judge people. We do all those things. We're real people. And I think when we can get past some of the stereotypes we have for ourselves on how we think we should be, then maybe we won't take ourselves so seriously. We can be humanized, and we can be more effective. Doesn't mean that we're going to, do poor policing because of that. But I think it's important that we see the humanity in all of us.
So as I listen to you all, and let me segue just a little bit. For those of you that are watching, time seems to be moving pretty quickly. I didn't think it would move so quickly. So it's not going to be too often that you have police personnel at the ready to answer your questions. So if you have them, please put them in the chat. But let me go back. So as I'm listening to you all, the thing that I'm hearing is, if we're going to partake in this social media thing, police departments, first of all, you need to already be communicating with the community, right? You need to already have established some sort of relationship in the community. That's the first thing I hear. Then if you're going to move forward and do it, then I think you should determine a message, right? What's your message going to be? Is it going to be, we're going to dance? Is it going to be coffee with a cop? What is it going to be? What's your message going to be? And then I'm hearing, we should know our audience. That's what I'm hearing. What do you think, Jim?
Well, I think, I have a great quote. Some will like it, some won't, so what? And I think it goes back to the chief, she was just saying about, we take ourselves so seriously and we're trying to be perfect all the time. Well, there is no perfect. There's the effort and there's process. What is your core values? What's the effort of your leadership? What's the effort of your department? What's the effort of your men and women who are going out and serving the community? And we try our very best. Those are the things that we need to be asking. We need to take some risk. So, as an example, I'll tell you about a risk that my sheriff didn't take. And I love him to death. Anyone that knows me, I lay on train tracks for the guy. So he's on the board of the Special Olympics. And so one of the things I do when I'm working on movies or whatever, if I can, I'll grab a celebrity, come over, and we'll do something for the Special Olympics. Because generally speaking, even as scared as Hollywood is, they'll support the Special Olympics. So the sheriff and I take him up to on set of John Wick 3. And with Keanu Reeves, he signs some shirts for us. He takes pictures with the sheriff, and we're going to auction these T-shirts off. When the movie's coming out, when John Wick 3 is coming out, I say to the sheriff, I said, hey, we should post the trailer, a special thank you, and post the trailers coming out this week on the Instagram, on the sheriff's office Instagram, and thank Keanu for supporting the sheriff's office in the Special Olympics. And he's all for it. Until what? Till somebody on his staff says, oh, we can't put it's a violent movie. It is a violent movie that everyone in the world is going to go see, whether you put it on your Instagram or not. It's not like we're supporting violence. You're supporting one of the biggest movie stars in the world who just supported you, your agency in Special Olympics. So I feel like we've got to take some risk and we've got to show some personality. We got to be unafraid to fail. Yeah, not every post is going to get 60 million likes. It's like Anthony said, it should just be, where's your honor in it? Where was your purpose in it? Did you do it with a good heart, or did you do it for some, other thing that gets you jammed up? Well, as long as we're doing it with a good heart, who cares? Who cares if Anthony takes a video with somebody and then the next day that person does something stupid, and the next thing you know, he's being called into the chief's office because the chief's like, hey, why'd you take a video with that guy? The next day he stole 2 cars. Well, I didn't know he was going to go steal 2 cars. So what's that change the dynamic of me having a good encounter with him? I just think we play way too scared all the time with this. And I'm grateful that I have an opportunity now to try to just do some stuff where I don't have to play by those same rules, because I think we got to show our personality and show where our heart is.
Thank you, Jim.
I just wanted to lean in really quick with what Jim said.
Lean in.
Jim, you said something that's really important, is we have to take some risks. And those risks are going to be essential because right now, recruitment and retention is tanked. And if we can't humanize ourselves inside the organizational culture, we're talking about public trust externally. We're also talking about American policing and how do we increase interest and awareness and education around the work that's being done. If we can't inspire the next generation of law enforcement, we're going to lose. We're going to lose. So we have to do all the things that we're talking about and so many more that I'm sure other practitioners and researchers and experts are looking into, but we have to do more than talk about it. We have to live about it. So.
Yeah, we got to be about it. Thank you, Chief. Listen, while you're on that, we got a Cruston in the chat. You brought this up. There's a huge problem with recruiting and retention in policing. To what degree? Everybody can chime in on this. To what degree can social media be used for recruiting? It sounds as if it's grossly underutilized. Whoever wants to jump in. You want to jump in, Chief?
It is. For example, I mean, we've all talked about vulnerability, but it's through our storytelling. It's through our ability and willingness to tell our story that somebody can be inspired by you to say, possibly because you are so broken, you are such a hot mess, but you still are doing it or did it, I can too. So we have to be able to let people see who we are and be able to encourage them where they're at. And yes, I know there's regulations and there's narrative around reducing standards and the quality of people we're bringing in and all of these things. But if we would take a step back and see where people are in their lives and do an interview where you can really get to know somebody a little bit, do your fact finding. But for us to release some of that to allow real people to come into the profession to do the real work, because they're going to be dealing with real people. Their testimony, their experience is going to just amplify and magnify the work. And so that's my 2 cents, so I can leave room for everybody else.
Yeah, I'll jump in, because I think one of the things that, I got asked a lot after making the documentary was the why. And one of my issues was with the recruitment and with the numbers going down. I would say to people, I'm going to be very honest, less people of color in law enforcement does not lead us to where we need to go. Less people of color in law enforcement executive positions for surely doesn't lead us where we need to go. Yet that's what's happening. More than anyone, the recruiting numbers are down with people of color, more than any other, that's across the nation. And so one of the things that we are not doing is again, knowing our audience. Look at all the recruitment videos. If you looked at 25 recruiting videos across this country, they're going to feel like they're an action movie. They're going to feel like you're going to see boats and motorcycles and SWAT. You're going to see dogs and foot chases. You're not going to see anything personal, not by most of them. They're not being made by real filmmakers. They're being made by commercial filmmakers and people who come in and they take the highlight reel of the sheriff's office. But what is it about the person? What, get Anthony on there, talk about his why, the Sarge, the chief. Like I can look at the chief and just say, hey, chief, what was your why? And let me ask you something. At the end of your career, when you retired, was it your foot chases that you talked about? Or was it the kids and the people that you affected that are still, and their families are changed? We don't do that in recruiting videos, do we? Yeah. We don't go to the projects and go walk around the projects and talking with people in low income housing areas. We don't. We're too busy on a boat in a high speed chase like it's Miami Vice. It's just not. We have to own this stuff and get on par with knowing our audience and learning how to speak to people to inspire them to come be a part of this solution and not just a part of the problem.
You guys feel this passion all over this panel. My God, the passion is just jumping through the screen and I absolutely love it. Sergeant McCants, where are you at, bro? I need you to weigh in on this whole recruitment and social media. And then I want you to tell me why you chose the platform that you utilize, why you use the podcast.
Well, like I say, as far as recruitment, like I say, social media is going to play a big part in it. Like I say, most people or most agencies just put up a poster saying that we're looking for individuals. They give how much money you're going to make, different benefits and all stuff, but you got to go a little bit more in depth. You got to humanize the badge just so people can understand that. Because like I say, some people come from law enforcement families. Like I say, they had their father, grandfather, all those people. And me, on the other hand, I wasn't one of those people. Like I said, I went to school for something different, ended up getting in trouble, talked to a police officer, he like, man, try police academy. I like, hey, what the heck, tried it, loved it, fell in love with it. That's how I became a law enforcement officer. But like I say, it came from talking to another law enforcement officer about, hey, man, you're not doing anything else. Maybe you could try it. If you don't like it, try something else. So that's why I tell people, like, as far as recruitment and law enforcement, you got to try something different. Like I say, if you look at most agencies, they're going to have that same card or wherever they put up about, they're recruiting individuals. They need these many people recruited. We give you a incentive bonus to sign on and all that stuff. And while it sounds good, they have to know more about law enforcement. Like I say, because, at the end of the day, you're going to show that clean-cut law enforcement officer that's been, working for 10 years, like doing traffic stops, things like that. But you got to show individuals that are down to earth. Like I said, that's what comes to humanizing the badge. As far as my social media platform, like I said, the one I chose was LinkedIn. I was able to connect with a lot of people from all over, basically humanizing the badge, some of the different stories that I go through, even open up about some of the battles that I go through as a law enforcement officer. Because most times people just think of us as these robots. Like you go to these calls, you handle it, you don't feel anything. But as we all know, once you go to a homicide or an accident, anything like that, you might not tell anybody, but you feel those things. And most people think, we're just numb to everything. So being able to open up to people, especially on LinkedIn, which is a business site, instead of thinking that we're all just robots, has helped me out with social media and all that. So that's why I try to be as human as possible with those individuals and let them know that while I am a law enforcement officer and I am professional, I am a real human. I go through all these emotions. Like I say, I have different battles that I go through daily just to stay afloat, and that everything's not perfect with law enforcement officers. We go through different things.
Okay. All right, gang, we're getting close to time, and I have one more question that I want to pose to you. So here we go. And we're going to try to keep it brief, like 30 seconds or something like that. So if an agency or an individual is interested in utilizing social media as you have, what is one tangible step you would advise them to take to lead them towards success?
Hire an expert in the field. Hire a social media expert, pay the money, hire someone that knows what they're doing, and then listen to them and have some courage. Don't try to be perfect.
Jim's my brother. I love that guy. Come on, AJ, tell us one tangible step.
Trust your people. You hired them for a reason. If they were good enough for you to hire, they should be good enough to go out here and be the recruiters. Just recruiting officers don't recruit. Your entire division of police are full of recruiters. Every single person you hired, when they go out to a run and they talk to somebody, that is a recruitment opportunity. Trust your people to do the right things.
Eric, Sergeant.
Just make sure you're giving off the right product. Show them that you have a good product for that law enforcement agency, and just be transparent with them. That's what I'm going to say.
Come on, Chief.
I'm going to say invest. That's the echo. Trust your people, right? Because you're getting the expertise and the training, and then you have to execute. You have got to execute. You can't just, again, talk about it, plan about it. You got to execute it. You got to go out and walk it, and you got to model it from the top.
So listen, I was just told that we have some extra time, and I'm so excited about that because you guys are rolling. This thing is on fire, and I am enjoying it. So if you have anything else you want to add regarding the tangible steps, please jump in and do so. But I had another question somewhere. I lost it.
While you look for that question, I just want to go back to the recruitment aspect of things. There's two things I want everybody to remember when we're talking about recruitment. The key to a successful recruitment video or advertisement or anything, aside from everything that was talked about, education and representation. There was a department in Texas that did a goofy video where this deputy was a used car salesman. And he's like, we got old beaters, and he's patting on older cars. We got newers, we got boats, we got helicopters. And it was hilarious. But throughout the video, he educated people on how friendly and humanized his division is. And there was representation. There was somebody from every culture, every walk of life who was wearing that uniform. And that video has well over 1 million views because of those two things.
Love it.
And what you're talking about, AJ, is influence. So we think being an influencer is for some other group of people.
Correct.
Law enforcement, leaders, your people are influencers. Let them be influencers.
Correct. People want to see it. People want to see us go out and be human and be positive. You just have to allow your people to do it.
Let's talk about how we tailor. We talked about the one tangible thing, but how do we tailor a message? Like, Jim, how do we tailor, a message that we want to get out to the public? We talked about show the positive, accentuate the positive. We talked about that, but how do we tailor it?
Well, I think that, always leading with the positive is good, but I think that you have to have a wider view, which means that, have the courage to show compassion, mistakes made, learning lessons. One of the things that I think is, if you go to work every day and you think you know everything, it's surely hard to learn anything. Sure. So, I think when it comes to the storytelling aspect is, I know I have an opportunity to teach and coach now and in the acting world. And one of the things that I find to be helpful is because I'm in the fight with other actors. I know what it is to have the pressures that come with that, right? Well, it's the same thing with us when we're, tailoring a story. Is people want to feel like the human side, like the chief said earlier. We got to show the human side, not just the person of steel behind this uniform that blocks everybody. So the more that you can, show that positive while you're telling that positive story, open up the human heart and tailor make it to make sure that people are getting a better understanding of the human element of law enforcement, the human element that comes into play of we love our families, we want to go home to our families, the human element that comes against officers over years of service if they're not getting continued training and education, if they're not if they work in, what's the old saying, there's people that do 1 year 20 times and then there's 20-year vets, right? So I think we just got to have the ability to tailor make stories with a wider point of view and a wider net to capture the audience.
Goes back to hiring a professional.
Yes, it does. Absolutely.
Right? Goes back to that. Someone put it in the chat and, I keep checking because I don't want to miss anyone's questions and I feel like I've hit them all, but I just want to end on this because I think it's so appropriate and it comes from someone, last name is Thomas, and it says, I always tell people that if we don't tell our story, no one else will. Right? I think that is the greatest summation of what we have talked about this evening regarding social media and law enforcement. And I want to thank Inspector Thomas for that. And I want to thank all of the viewers who tuned in tonight to hear these wonderful people tell their stories about social media. And listen, they're the experts. They are the experts. We appreciate your time. I think Marcia's somewhere on standby, ready to jump in and take us out of here. But I just want to thank you all. Before I close though, I want you to have one opportunity to give us your last bit of knowledge and wisdom regarding the topic. So let's start off the way we started. Let's start off with Officer AJ.
I'll make mine short and sweet. Just saying the word water does not make you wet. We need to stop talking about how much we want to make change and actually go out and make it.
Awesome. Sergeant McCants.
Okay, yeah, just want people to understand that the power of social media nowadays, like I say, everybody has their phones in their hand, and if us as law enforcement can reach those people in a more positive way and let them know that we're transparent, that we're humans, I think we can move forward a lot better than what we're doing right now.
Jim?
Yeah, I would just say, as courageous as it is to put our lives on the line, put your life on the line for someone else, I think it's just as courageous to really lean into compassion and learning and understanding and admitting our faults. And that goes to the vulnerability side of things. So I really just think that let's have that same level of courage that we all shared putting that uniform on and going out and serving, and that same level of courage it takes to not know what's coming on the next call. Well, let's have a courageous heart. Let's have a big courageous heart to just let things slide. Don't worry about being perfect. Instead, worry about leading with love. And that's what I think we got to do.
And that is why you are making those wonderful films. A courageous heart. Ooh, that gave me goosebumps. Okay, Chief, take us home.
Wow, I really want to drop the mic right there.
Yeah, right.
I would say that, this webinar was about voices of change, and it's during Black History Month. And for us to all stay inspired, encouraged, and for us to go out, and when we do, let's show up, because how we show up matters. And what we do when we arrive, when we engage, whatever that looks like on social media or in person, we have to show up in the right way because people are watching us. And we're talking about all these things we think leaders and agencies and organizations should do. Individually, we are influencers. And so I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to be a part of the panel.
You said something there too, sis. Individually, we are our influencers. Woo, you said something there. Marcia, did you hear this panel?
I did. I heard every word of this panel.
Listen, I'm just so thankful that I was in the midst, because this was some fire. We gave out some fire tonight. You might want to revisit it. I'm just saying. This stuff was some good stuff, but I'm going to turn it over to you. I thank you for the opportunity. Listen, my new friends, I really appreciate you. You all were awesome.
Well, thank you, Lieutenant Colonel Turner Childs. This was awesome. I also want to thank Sergeant McCants and Jonni, Redick. You guys, Jim Clark and AJ already know this. Once you become part of the family, we don't let you go. And as AJ and Jim Clark can attest to, we will tap you multiple times, so you're already in the circle. I also want to thank Target and Noble for your partnership in making tonight's program possible, as well as your enduring commitment to addressing topics in the field of law enforcement and presenting solutions that will benefit our ever-changing communities. So to all of our listeners, be sure to look for more programs on our website at lawenforcementmuseum.org. And if you're ever in DC, you must stop by 444 East Street Northwest and in our nation's capital. I want to thank you all again for joining us this evening. It has been an awesome night, and we look forward to seeing you in DC.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Encore. We hope you'll join us again next month for another revisit of past museum programs and conversations. Stay safe. A special thanks to all of you for listening to this episode of Encore, a series from the Precinct 444 podcast network by the National Law Enforcement Museum. Please subscribe to Precinct 444 on your favorite podcasting platform to stay connected and to receive our latest content as soon as it drops. We would love to hear from you. Send in your questions, comments, and feedback to precinct444@NLEOMF.org. You can help us make our content even better. The National Law Enforcement Museum is located at 444 East Street Northwest in Washington, D.C., and is dedicated to telling the story of American law enforcement. We expand and enrich the relationship between law enforcement and the community through educational journeys, immersive exhibitions, and insightful programs. Find us online at lawenforcementmuseum.org and stay tuned for more podcast content from Precinct 444. Until next time, stay safe. We'll see you at the precinct.